Welcome to the village. Okay, so I've been waiting for this episode. Today I have Sister Christine here. I want to thank you so much for being here, Sister. Why don't you introduce yourself further to everybody, tell everybody what you do, how long you've been doing it. You've been here at St. Mary's for a while.
Yes, I have. Well, my name is Sister Christine Mura. I'm a daughter of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. And I started working with St. Mary's 14 years ago. Really, I was recruited to come here to be the face of St. Mary's for the Latino community. It took a while to figure out what that meant and how I could best make a contribution in that. Because my previous background hasn't been in healthcare, but I've really learned a lot and really love being a part of this world now. So what happened was about a year into my stay here, I was walking through the emergency room as I used to do at that point to see if anyone was Spanish speaking and needed assistance as I was trying to develop what my role would be. And I came upon a woman who in one of the cubicles, and she was crying. She had just had her second miscarriage within a year. So when I stopped in, I asked her, what was going on. She was very discouraged, very sad, thinking of returning to Mexico, although her husband had been working here for a number of years at that point. And I asked her if anyone had helped her to figure out why she had had these miscarriages. And she said no. So I said I knew a doctor I could bring her to, because at that point we had a primary care physician who spoke Spanish. So we went to Dr. Ruiz, and he ordered blood work, among other things. And when we went back for the results, he said to her, "Everything's normal. You're healthy. There's no reason that you won't have a baby. And when you do, name it after me."
Oh, that's sweet.
Well, a few months later, she got pregnant and had a beautiful little girl. You know her, Dr. Majid. She's one of your patients. And Mom and Dad named her after Dr. Ruiz and me. Yeah. And then a few years later, they had a second little girl. And that was the first family I met. That was really my first glimpse into a whole other part of our community here in this area, which is the community of the migrant farm workers who work on the dairy farms in the counties around here.
Yeah, so that was your introduction, and that's a really beautiful story.
Yeah, and the way it happened was I started visiting out to the farm of that family, and a few months later on one of my visits, I met another family who was there visiting them, and so introduced myself to them and shared that I could help them access health care. And then it spread like that through word of mouth, because what I discovered that really no one even here at St. Mary's, the whole system, knew, is that there was this whole hidden part of our community who didn't think they had any access to healthcare. And there were big impediments. One of the biggest being language.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, language is a tough thing because it's hard, but it shouldn't stop you, right? Because behind that language is the same exact person.
Exactly.
Right? I've noticed in the nursery, and I always say this, I find it so interesting. I see babies as soon as they're born, and in the nursery, they all cry the same way. They want the same things, and
Yes.
they need the same things.
Yes.
Boy, girl, race, religion, whatever with their parent. I mean, their little baby needs are all the same.
Absolutely.
So, behind that language is a person who has a need. So you've noticed that with these migrant farm workers, which I've gotten to know them through you, because I think that's how it kind of came to be. You were bringing them to Dr. Ruiz, right? And then Dr. Romero.
That's right.
Was here, and I kind of took on a lot of patients.
You inherited.
Her. I inherited, yeah.
You inherited my folks.
It became a natural thing, and now it's kind of a go-to for the children, because we manage between you and the language line it's very rewarding for me to take care of them because the gratitude that they have because they are just happy to get some health care.
They are. Besides language, that was another big piece. They didn't know where they had a right to go. St. Mary's has, in large part, become a home for these folks, because I bring them here and they've gotten a big welcome. And you're right, Dr. Majid, I do have my favorite providers who I find it easy to work with because we work well, because like you understand the social situation of people. And when I say, well, Dad only has one day of the week off and it's always a Monday. And that's the only time the child can come in for an appointment. You'll work with that.
It's important because it's a very difficult situation for like the dad that only has these parents and these families who only have the one day off because it's serious, important work they do. They really can't, it's not something you can give them a work note or become very flexible with like other jobs.
They are. And that's something I discovered that I think most people don't know. One of the difficulties, one of the real difficult conditions of this work is that the workers are pretty much required to work 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, and they have a fixed day off. But if they can switch with another worker, it's possible. Like for the adults, for example, that becomes difficult for them to get to a medical appointment also. They might switch with another worker if someone is willing, or they have to ask special permission of the farm owner, the boss, to be able to switch a day.
Yeah. And this attitude we have to get them the help they need is really at St. Mary's, we just take care of people.
That's it.
It's the mission. It doesn't matter their background or whatever, wherever they come from. We take care of people. It is our mission in practice. And in pediatrics, you take care of children. All we see is children. Like we see them as a child, regardless of their social situation. Like I said, all children have the same needs. They all need care.
And I'm glad that you brought up the mission, because I think this is one of the areas in St. Mary's where we see it most clearly. Because this is among the most vulnerable people in the population that we serve. And St. Mary's has a very generous financial assistance program that people can apply for. Anyone. It helps many people in our community, but especially the folks that I work with. Now, all of the children are entitled to insurance, which is a great help, as you know. Yeah.
Definitely. I think the purpose of talking about these people, because it's so misunderstood, the rest of the society here, when you see anybody that maybe doesn't look like you, sound like you, do the things you do, it's kind of oftentimes looked at in a negative light. There's a misunderstanding whether it's migrant farm workers or anybody else who doesn't quote unquote belong. There's a misunderstanding as to what they're doing here, how they affect you and me. Somebody's not bothering you. Why do they affect you? And why do we have an opinion or a judgment on why they're here? So what are they doing?
Well, I found a lot of people are surprised to find that they're here in our community, because they tend to be largely hidden. We call them migrant farm workers and their families. A lot of the workers on the farms are single men who have left their families behind and are doing this hard work to send money back home to support their children, their wives, their parents, their in-laws, because most are from Guatemala and Mexico. Here, the folks I work with are more Guatemalans, and in their country, healthcare is nothing like it is here. You have to pay upfront for any services you receive. So our U.S. health system is very strange to them. They're unfamiliar with it. But even though we call them migrant farm workers, that's officially what they are. But on the dairy farms, they don't move around like crop pickers would. They're here year round. And a number of the families that I know have been on the same farm for a long time. The men do very, very hard and dirty work, and really our dairy industry, at least in our area, pretty much depends on their labor, because it's not labor that North Americans generally want to do.
12 hours a day.
Work the hours they work, or it's very hard.
So yeah, they're here as like farm laborers.
They are, and they've left their countries, not always by choice because of the American dream. It's because the economy in their countries don't allow for them to work and provide for their families.
I mean, the situations in other countries, like some of the Central American or Mexico, I don't think people realize how bad it is. Besides corruption, there's no opportunity. Everybody's not cared for. There's no concept of a Medicaid or, and any of these benefits. There's no WIC for the people. They just don't have opportunity. Without any opportunity, there's no survival.
Right. Like I just listened to a fascinating podcast recently on the topic of the corn meal, the production, the processing of corn into masa, the dough that's used to make tortillas and tamales, and how corn for thousands of years has been integral to societies. I think we're familiar with it in Mexican cuisine, like tacos and all of that.
Taco Tuesday.
Yes. And the Guatemalans almost more so dependent on corn. And the fascinating thing is the whole production of the basic flour. It's not just cornmeal, it's processed in a particular way with lye, etc., to be able to be formed into tortillas and tamales, has become industrialized and become big business. And the small farm producers and corn mills, etc., have been forced out of business. Yeah. Like that's just one little example of how people have been impoverished in these countries.
Exactly.
And that's a worldwide story, I think.
Yeah, exactly. There's more like machinery and big businesses.
And its relationship to what causes immigration.
Yeah, because people are stuck. And if you think about it, anybody is, there's that saying, home is where the heart is.
Yeah.
You want to be home. What is home for you?
Right. And when you bring that up, it makes me think of accompanying people through very difficult periods, like for a mom, a dad, when their parent dies back in their country and they can't get home, to grieve with their families, to memorialize their parent, to bury them, to share in all the rituals that the family does in their culture. It's very difficult. And think of all the children you see who don't have the opportunity to know grandparents.
They don't get to know grandparents. They don't have that quality, fun time with grandparents. They don't sometimes get to really grow up with their siblings. The sibling wasn't able to join the family.
Yes. So, that's happened, and that's a special form of heartache. It really is.
Yeah, your home and your family. We all know how we feel about our families and our homes. Without your home or your family, you feel isolated. You feel alone. Even if you're in a crowd of people, there's no place like home. Right now I'm quoting The Wizard of Oz, but but it's true. That's what that movie is all about, home and family. It's true. I think everybody can relate to that feeling. Now, not everybody has, people who are able to mobilize and have opportunities in their lives take for granted that they have that. And when you think about it, why would anybody purposely want to lose that? You don't purposely want to be in a situation where you don't have your home, you don't have your family. I mean, where you grew up, where your language, your culture, your food, your land, your people, just the land, just to look at the home where you come from, it's a big sacrifice. And just coming to a place where you didn't grow up, you don't know the people, you don't know the culture. You may not fit into the culture, it doesn't make sense to you, and you don't have the opportunity. It's not that they're coming here as students in college, here to study and become like a doctor or a scientist. They're here to work 12 hours a day.
Right.
It's a struggle. It's survival.
It is. And I think you can easily see that another tension that arises over the years as I've gotten to accompany families now for quite a while and see a number of children born, is that as the kids grow up here, they become accustomed to what's here. This is their environment. This is what they're used to.
Everybody wants to fit in.
Yeah, and the parents may be thinking of going back home to their country, or thinking that at some point they'll have to leave. And then what about my children? My children don't know Mexico. My children don't know Guatemala. And maybe when I raise the topic with them, they'll say, no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go there. You know?
Because they get into the school systems, they play sports, they make friends.
Right.
And it's already been such a clash for them to start here. And once they get used to it, to have to do something different. It's not easy as a child, even when they first come, to the fact that their parents don't know English. And then many times they end up translating or trying to understand things for their own sake because the parent isn't understanding.
Yes.
So it's this maturity level that they have to obtain that's not really psychologically the greatest. A kid is supposed to be a kid. They're not supposed to translate for their parent.
That's
and make,
right.
You know.
That's right. And that's why there are even like rules about that, to safeguard both the child, mostly the child, and also the parent, for the integrity of the interaction with the medical provider.
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult thing all the way around, because when you do go back home, like I can speak as a child who grew up here. I mean, I had easy access to go around because my dad was an engineer. He wasn't a farm worker. So, and my grandmother was here, my uncles were here, my cousins, go back home to India and you can come, and your family from India can come visit you. So the way I can understand is when you have like a different subculture. Like my dad became Americanized. He loved it here. But really, you identify you're American, you have a different subculture, but then that's normal for America. You have your Americans that are Italian. You have Americans that are Polish. You have Americans that are, from South America. We're all American, but we all have a different background because America originally was natives. So everybody is from a different country. Right. Everybody can relate to that. But of course, when you do go back home, if you want to call it that, like when I go to India, it's very different. I couldn't imagine being there and grow, the way the schooling, the way your cousins from there, they look at you a little bit differently because you're like the American cousin. So it's a different whole mindset. You couldn't imagine growing up there because you grew up here. So you can imagine just getting up when you're 18 one day and going and living there. Like you wouldn't be able to do that. So then you look at these kids, if they do have to go back one day or they do have to relate back to something back home, that's very difficult, almost impossible.
Yeah, it is. And yet to one degree or another, I think they also have like the minority experience in school, which is sometimes a little difficult, a little challenging.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to a number of years ago. I don't know if you remember when there was a mass shooting in Texas that targeted Hispanic Americans. And one of I have the two girls from the first family that I talked about are both my goddaughters.
Oh.
And one of them was talking with her mom and saying something about her principal told her, well, she's Mexican in a good way. And she said, she's like, no, I'm not. And so her mom was like, yes, you're Mexican. Yeah. Dad's from Mexico, mom's from Mexico, you're Mexican. And she said emphatically, I don't want to be Mexican. They're killing Mexicans.
Wow.
So, I mean, they're sensitive to some of that.
The kids are picking up, and it is true. So, like I mentioned, that everybody's from somewhere else, but there are minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't get into how and why, but I had minority experiences.
Did you?
Oh, so often.
Oh.
With kids I grew up with, racism was very much a part of the experience growing up in New Jersey. Oh. And yeah, it wasn't like, oh, you fit in, you're fine. No, racism is still an issue everywhere.
Yeah.
And even besides racism, just racial misunderstanding. Like there's like microaggressions.
Oh,
so
yeah.
People don't even know they're doing it, and you can sense it. So, but there was some blatant racism growing up in New Jersey, and you do know you're different because you go home and you eat different food. You celebrate different holidays if you're not a minority religion. So Islam is not a minority religion in the world. It's one of the top 3 religions. Right. But the country is not a Muslim country.
Right. And there's been great discrimination against Muslims, besides a lot of antagonism to Muslims.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's tough to grow up something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the town you're in, if you're the minority in that town, it's a difficult thing. So from that perspective, I can understand. But the way that is harder for these kids of the migrant farm workers is their parents are not a part of society. So like I said, my parents are part of society. My dad has like colleagues, coworkers, they're all like going to Christmas parties. We were becoming American together as a family. These farm workers, like you said, they're hidden, but the kids aren't as hidden because they have to kind of be the face for the family.
Yes. And I mean, like they go to school, they have interactions, many of them very positive, with classmates, schoolmates, they make friends. But then another feature of their life is that life on a farm is pretty isolating.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, a good part of it, because of transportation.
Yeah.
If you're on a farm, you don't walk down the block to play with a schoolmate. Your mom maybe can't talk to your friend's mom because of the language barrier and set up a quote unquote play dates.
And where are they going to have the opportunity to learn English, these parents? And usually when they come, they're coming here because of the fact that they are people with less opportunity in their countries. They're not the rich city people of their country that came here for a better life because they can, and they're here to be a cut above the rest. They're here because they're the low end of the economy. So those people usually are very embedded deep in their culture and their villages back home. So they don't speak English. These people are like a different type of immigrant here into the country. They come here for a very sad reason. There's no like going back home and showing off, I'm from America now. It's not like that. Their families miss them. They miss their families, and they're displaced.
Yeah.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking about how we've had kids who I talk to them, and either if they're gaining weight or having some issues, say, well, are you in activities? Are you in sports? They can't be in those things. They can't participate, even though a lot of the kids, they want to play soccer or do something familiar from back home because they've made friends too who they want to play soccer, whether they want to be in sports or activities so they can be with their friends, but they can't because there's no one to pick them up and drop them off.
Right. There's few that can do that. Yeah. If these jobs weren't open, they wouldn't be coming to fill them in our area,
Yeah. These are not...
If there were people here already to fill these jobs, the jobs wouldn't be open to needing the workers.
There's something for them to do. And they're definitely earning their keep here. They're not getting any handouts.
Yeah.
They
pay taxes, which a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, they definitely are here doing good, honest work, and they're needed. Because we need we need the farm products. So they're working hard, and they're making money through the hardworking way.
Yes.
And they're definitely not taking jobs that anybody else they're not competing with us.
And the other piece of this is that part of the benefits, part of the benefits that are provided, that's part of what a laborer earns is his housing or housing for his family on the farm. That's understood.
I think that the misunderstanding is when people from other countries are taking taking housing,
advantage.
They're taking advantage, they're taking the housing, they're not doing, the migrant farm workers are not doing that.
They are, and they're very wary.
Yeah.
You know, they're afraid of drawing any attention to themselves.
Yeah. So I think that one thing that unless you've experienced, having to get up and leave everything that you wouldn't appreciate what it is to have to sacrifice that way. I mean, I've seen, if you watch some of these like documentaries on Netflix or even like the Discovery Channel or anyway that they describe, there's people, even like in China, the people that work in the factories, they may not be working in a factory close to their home. They're coming from another city. Yeah. They never get to see their families either. People around the world do whatever they need to survive.
Yes.
The people who are fortunate.
Yeah.
We should count our blessings as opposed to really, like, let's not jump the gun. Let's try to understand another human being.
Yeah, and when you bring up the question of language, the adults really don't have the possibility, like, of going to language classes.
Right.
The men pick up more English through just working on the farm and interacting with the farm owners. But I am very grateful. I learned Spanish back in 1982. When I went to Bolivia. And I'm so grateful that I had that experience. It's one of the best language institutes in the world in Cochabamba, Bolivia, for Spanish. I remember when I was first starting to go to classes, one of the sisters took me on the bus to show me the route so that I'd be ready for the first day of class. It came around on Monday to go to class, and I realized in a panic, I didn't know how to tell the bus to stop, and I'll never forget that because it's a good example to me of how people can feel immersed in a society in a language that they don't know or know very little of. Yeah. Which gets to, like, a large part of my work is interfacing with the different practices, to set up appointments, to get test results and communicate them to the patients. You know that because, like Dr. Majid, you're very available. I've had mothers call me on the weekend and I've been able to text you and get an answer as to what mom should do. Or
if they call the on-call, it's tough then. You don't have a language line through the on-call.
Right.
So it is hard for them. It's scary.
Yeah, it's scary above all.
When you when you can't communicate and you don't know, you're lost in a crowd. It's a scary feeling. Glad that we have the ability. And in America, it's the land of opportunity, but it's also the land of, this is where people have come since the creation of the United States of America to survive, right? The initial immigrants to America in the 1600s, 1700s wasn't for, it wasn't for the land of opportunity per se. It was the land of survival.
Yes.
To get away from persecution and to live free.
Yes.
Not everybody gets to live free, but there's an opportunity, right? So we should be proud that we get to have that for people.
Yeah, and to experience the richness of another culture, because every culture has its richness. So maybe it's my turn to ask you, how do you find the families that I bring to you and the children?
I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is their gratitude and how humble they are. They have a respectful demeanor, and the children are very quiet. They're not constantly being told to behave themselves.
No, they're not. No.
There's a respect and a regard to being in a doctor's office. They listen because either you're translating or there's the iPad, the language line services. they feel free to communicate and tell me their concerns. And then when I answer them, they're listening and they're trying to absorb. Then they always say thank you and they're very grateful for the healthcare and somebody listening to them and somebody taking care of their child, because everybody wants their children taken care of. I do like, you can translate a healthy diet and exercise into any culture.
Yes.
So, when we're talking about portion control or what they're eating, the protein, the vegetables, you can translate that into different cultures. So it's pretty neat to listen to what it is that they're eating and what it is that they're doing. And, you learn a different culture too, because I'm very open to these natural remedies. What grandmas do. I'm a very holistic, but especially when it comes to children, prescriptions sometimes are not appropriate. So when they come to me and they tell me they want to put the coin on the belly button to reduce the hernia or do something like that they would normally do even for a cold, some natural remedies, I'm absorbing that. And then I'm reading about it, and then we're learning together.
And that's actually something I was going to bring up, because I think that's your recommendation of natural remedies is a plus with these folks. Although, again, it's funny. Sometimes I run into people who feel like they're not really getting the best unless they get a prescription. But I think,
And luckily, saline is a prescription.
Oh, yeah.
And it depends, on the person. People do want a prescription. But I think it's valuable to me because I like to stop and take care of people from different cultures, because it helps me to learn different things. And people are willing to try anything for their children. So if I tell another mother that this is what one mother recommended, and there's nothing that's not medically unsafe, people are willing to try, and I'm willing to spread the good word about it.
That's right.
You learn so many different things from people and how they celebrate too. They probably don't get as much time off to do things, but they have holidays, they have Christmas.
Yes.
They have different things that they do. So if you have a minute to just talk and observe. Being a doctor is a very social profession because you're talking to people, especially when you're talking to families like I do. You're just learning a lot about what's important to people. The medical and the exam is only so much. There's a lot of conversation.
Yeah. And I think we can all talk about pre-COVID and post-COVID, So some of my relating to the families has changed a bit because I don't do as much visiting on the farms because I live with a very vulnerable population myself. Yeah. So I don't want to bring anything into the home. But largely speaking, because the parents trust me, the children usually have a very affectionate relationship with me that I'm very, very grateful for. I'm very grateful for the trust. It's very humbling. And as you've said, they are very grateful people for anything that you can do for them. And as you mentioned, learning new things. The reason I'm happy to keep at this for so many years is I feel like I'm constantly open to learning something. And sometimes it's like how to access something like in the medical field because I have gradually learned this, or something cultural, etc. It's always changing for me and always something different. I don't do as much transportation for families as I used to, but I do some, and that's just a very good moment too. And early on with the first family that I spoke about, I realized that when mom came to the end of her pregnancy and was ready to give birth, that a very important thing for us in our culture, and very much so in their culture, is to have your mom present with you.
Yeah.
And their moms are back home.
Right.
So I have offered, I'm not exactly a surrogate mom, but I've been present now for a lot of the births of the children of the families that I relate to as a support to the mom.
There's so many blessings in doing things for other people that make their heart happy.
Yeah.
You don't even realize how much you touch them with that.
Yes.
They ask me about you. They ask me, are you going to tell Sister Christine?
Oh, really?
Are you going to call her? Are you going to give her results? So it means a lot to people. Sometimes it feels like so much to do. We're so busy with doing these things, but it's a life well spent, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, we as human beings, we tend to immediately assume the worst or assume something negative. We want to complain. So to kind of try to stop and assume something good, like maybe this person who is here because they have to be. They're not here, don't get on the defensive.
They're not taking advantage. I don't see them taking advantage in any way at all. Yeah. And these are good people.
They are good
almost
people.
Without exception.
Yeah.
I haven't met, but I've heard of a few cases, where that isn't true, but very few and far between. These are family people.
Yeah.
And one of the families, is one of the very few cases where a single woman, a mom, is doing this very, very physically difficult work.
Mm-hmm.
She was a victim of domestic violence, and I mean real violence. And now she has two of her sons here.
Mm-hmm.
These are not bad people. Yeah.
And everybody has a story.
Yeah, everybody. That's really good that you said that. Everybody has a story. And I think that one of the biggest forms of respect for the people that I work with, it's very important for me to hear their stories and to give their life histories the respect that we all deserve.
Yeah, we're all human beings and we're all living creatures, and every living creature deserves respect.
Yeah.
We all have a soul and a heart, and everybody's story is different, but should be respected. The more you learn about other people, the more enriched your life will be.
Yeah, and I mean, I see that in action in your practice. And just a side note, one of the things I always say that I very much appreciate about you is how you are very faithful to asking about the developmental markers for the children from birth on up, and how that has led to interventions to get help for a couple of the kids families that I work with. I very much appreciate that.
My attitude is, if you come in to the office, you're going to get everything that you need to get because you came into the office. You're not going to get anything less than anybody else, because if you're a kid sitting in rooms 1 through 6, every kid, whether it's room 1 or 6, is going to get the same attention and care because you're a patient in that room.
And, I know you do that for all of your kids. And that's, as a pediatrician, looking at you, that's something I very much appreciate. Yeah.
Thank you. I try. It's not always easy, but all you can do is try.
Yeah.
And you do too. I mean, you're sitting with me here at 6:30 on a Tuesday so that we could tell people about this.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you've learned or that you think people should know about this specific population? Or even if you're talking about just people in general, is there something we should keep in mind?
Well, one of the things I would say is that my life has been greatly enriched by being able to accompany these folks. It is through healthcare. That's my entree into their lives. But I sometimes don't have the words to say to them when they thank me for what I do, that really it's a privilege. It's a privilege. They are such good people. We're all again, made in the image and likeness of God. And maybe they don't hear it all that often.
Mm-hmm.
And as you keep saying, everybody deserves to hear that, to know that their goodness, their family values, their trust enrich my life in a tremendous way. And seeing their example of hard work, their values of sacrificing for their families back home, the parents for their children that they have here. I see a lot of sacrifice on their parts and done with a lot of faith that God's going to continue to take care of them too.
Yeah.
In a way that I might find it difficult to have that same faith in similar situations.
You know, a lot of the religions, big monotheistic religions, we have a similar sense of things. So there's the belief, you know, in Islam that the more struggles you have, the closer you become to God.
Really? Okay.
So I think sometimes it's, you're fortunate when you're less worldly, and you're like, some people struggle so much, they go through difficulties, and it goes one way or the other. Like, you can just be angry and let it consume you and turn away from faith, or you can realize that, you need to turn towards faith, and that gives you the strength. So
yeah, and maybe I'll give an example along this line. In talking to a family that I'm close to, there are 3 siblings that I know, adults. The mother of one family, her brother who lives with her family and on the same farm, and then another family who's up in the Saratoga area. And these 3 siblings, their father recently grew seriously ill. And because you have to pay up front for medical care back in Mexico, they were faced with the decision of paying for his health care. He was not a good man, in a sense, not a nice man.
yeah.
They paid thousands of dollars for his care. And in the end, he did die. And like shortly before his death, it was a question of him going into intensive care in a private hospital. In a sense, I was thinking his care was in their hands. And they said, because they had to make an instant decision, are we going to pay for this or not? Can he go? Will we send the money? And they said, yes, do this. And I reflected back to Mom, whom I'm close to, the woman, when I was talking with her recently. What a great act of mercy, like expression of the mercy of God, that I saw them performing in this instance to value and love their father to his death, really.
What a decision, and to have to make these big decisions on the spur of the moment.
And this was a significant amount of money for them to send. It's not like they have a lot of savings.
Yeah.
Usually, my folks don't have savings, period. They don't.
No concept of
they're not able to.
And,
No. Yeah.
So these are the things, like you said, even there's many countries in the world where you have to pay up front, or you have to, or you're not going to get discharged unless you pay, or you're not going to get the treatment unless you pay at least a certain amount, percentage at least. There isn't that concept.
And that's a barrier to healthcare too, for the folks that I deal with. Like, I had a very dramatic case in the spring of a young woman, 20 years old, who I was contacted after she was taken to an emergency room and then transferred to another hospital. And her cousin and the woman she was living with didn't know what had happened to her. It turned out she had a ruptured appendix and needed a resection of her intestines because of the infection had spread.
Wow.
And on the way to the emergency room, the woman with whom she was living was bringing her, and the cousin called and said, "Don't take her. We don't have money to pay."
Wow.
So sometimes people say to me, can I go to the doctor? I don't have money to pay. So it comes out of that.
And it's so interesting and tragic that, human life is not always valued this way in other countries, because that I know our healthcare system has problems, but healthcare is, you can walk into an emergency room. It's not always the
Yes.
appropriate place to be,
Right.
but if you're having an emergency, it is. Or or you're not having an emergency, they don't turn people away because of money.
Right. Because sometimes my folks will ask, I'll say, well, you need to go to the emergency room. Will I have to pay? What will I have to pay?
Yeah. And, eventually you will have to pay.
Yeah.
But you may have to pay for a long period of time because they may set you up with a payment plan or something like that. The healthcare is much more expensive here than other countries.
Yes.
But you won't not get care.
Right. And St. Mary's is very generous with charity care to any patient that is or underinsured. Yeah.
It feels good to be really living the mission. This is a great example of what we do.
That's exactly it.
Migrant farm workers are vulnerable. They need care. And they really appreciate it.
And I love being the interface for them. I guess as Sister Danielle said a long time ago, we want you to be the face of St. Mary's. I'm able to be the face of St. Mary's to this very particular part of our population that, as you say, is very vulnerable. And that's a great joy to me.
Yeah. It's a joy. It's a blessing. And we appreciate you. And I appreciate you introducing me to these amazing people. I'm honored and blessed to be able to care for their children. We'll keep it going from here on out.
Yes, and I love working with providers like yourself who really look to understand and always respect these people as all your patients. So thank you.
Thank you.